the District Line train to Upminster. The next station is Whitechapel. Change for the Elizabeth Line and London Overground services.
Hi, welcome to another video. Two things. I forgot my glasses, so you're probably going to have sunglasses on the whole tour. From the thumbnail and the intro, you know what this is about, so I probably won't be my jovial, laughing self because of the content matter of this video. I've always been fascinated by the mystery of Jack the Ripper, who hasn't, right? But I thought, I wonder how many of those locations still exist, and if they don't exist, what does the place look like now? So I'm up in London, and I'm going to visit as many locations that are linked to what is known as the Whitechapel murders, which I believe were 11 murders committed during the period of 1888 to 1891. And in that list of 11 are the 5 canonical victims, wildly considered by, I think, all novelists, ripperologists, even the police at the time, that there were 5 because of the MO, the modus operandi, the throat slitting, the knives being used, as well as, you know, in many cases the victim being completely, ripped apart. Jack the Ripper, right? So my video is going to actually be quite diverse because I'm going to be flitting about to all the locations that I've got. So I'm not going to say, right, and this is location number 1, this is location number 2. So what I probably do is just put everything into chapters, and yeah, you could jump about to your heart's content. So let the macabre show begin. Okay, this junction here, Osborne Street, Brick Lane, Wentworth Street and Old Montague Street, right on this corner, is very significant because the very first victim of the Whitechapel murders was assaulted here. And they consider her the first victim. Emma Smith was attacked on this corner by a local gang in the early hours of the 3rd of April 1888. Although she survived the attack and managed to walk back to her lodgings, where she told the deputy keeper, Mary Russell, that she'd been attacked by 2 or 3 men, Mary Russell took Emma to the Royal London Hospital, where a medical examination revealed that a blunt object had been inserted into her vagina and it ruptured her peritoneum, and she developed peritonitis and died 9 AM the following day. So she went down as the very first victim of the Whitechapel murders. Look at that old building, the Buxton. Right, let's go up here. Something to see at Brick Lane. Okay, that building in front says hotel. That used to be the Frying Pan pub. Now, approximately 11 PM on the 30th of August, Ann Nichols was walking along Whitechapel Road, coming up here, and she visited the Frying Pan pub. She left here at 12:30, and by 1:20 AM she had returned to the kitchen of her Flower and Dean lodging house. 50 minutes later, she was seen by the deputy lodging housekeeper, who asked her for her 4pence required for her bed. It used to be a pub. It's astonishing, isn't it? It's changed hands many times. I wonder if I can overlay a picture. Anyway, she was ordered to leave the dossing house, and unconcerned, she mentioned that she had a new black velvet bonnet, and she replied, "I'll get my doss money. Can you see what a jolly bonnet I've got?" So Ann Nichols was last seen alive walking down Osborne Street, which is straight ahead of us there, so she'd obviously left the pub, gone down. She's got a jolly bonnet. and that was 2:30, which was about an hour before her actual death. Okay, so when we think of the Canonical Five, we sometimes dismiss the other victims of the Whitechapel murders, and one of those victims was Martha Tabram. Many consider her to be potentially the first victim, so maybe there were six, Canonical six, but it was in Gunthorpe Street, which at the time of the murders was known as George Yard, that Martha Tabram was murdered. Now at this junction with Whitechapel High Street, the White Hart pub still stands, and it was in the basement of this pub that suspect George Chapman worked as a barber in 1890. Who was Jack the Ripper? There have been numerous attempts to uncover the identity of the man who brutally murdered 5 East End women between the 31st of August and the 30th of November 1888. Amongst these suspects were the Queen's Victoria's heir, the Duke of Clarence. A less prominent suspect was George Chapman, a barber, surgeon, who at the time lived in the cellar of this pub. He is later found guilty of poisoning his 3 wives, for which he was hung. Was he also Jack the Ripper? But it was in this alley, which has now completely changed and it's all modernised. But you can imagine it in 1888. It probably wasn't even as wide as this. Martha Tabram was brutally slain. Now she, I think, had last been seen with sailors, wasn't it? Sailors. And then they'd subsequently had a line-up. But no one was ever found guilty of her murder. Martha Tabram. Such intrigue. Who could it be? Who do you think it was? There are so many suspects. I have an idea who I think might be the ideal candidate, but yeah, we'll never know, will we? I'm now standing on what is known as Durwood Street. This used to be Bucks Row, and it was on Bucks Row that the first victim was found. It's completely changed, as you can see. If I just stand over here, I think I can overlay one image, because the building at the back there was actually present during the time of the Ripper murders, and probably where those people are stood now was the entrance to the Bucks Road Yard, where the horses were kept, and that's where Mary Ann Nichols was found. Now, victim number 1, Mary Ann Nichols, 31st of August 1888, at 3:40 a.m, a carman named Charles Allen Cross, birth name Lechmere, discovered what he initially believed to be tarpaulin lying on the ground just up here, in front of a gated stable entrance in Bucks Row. Upon inspecting the object, Cross discovered that the tarpaulin was actually the body of a woman, and she lay on her back with her eyes open. I'm going to assume it's here because of the proximity of the building here. Now, Charles Cross, aka Charles Lechmere, is one of the Jack the Ripper suspects, maybe even one of the main suspects, and the theory suggests that Lechmere may have murdered Nichols and began mutilating her body when he suddenly heard the sound of Robert Paul's footsteps, which was the other guy that kind of discovered the body, and he rapidly pulled down the clothing to cover up the wounds and portrayed himself as the discoverer of the body. So there are many websites, many YouTube channels that, you know, talk about all the suspects. I don't think I'm going to go into details here, but this is, or was, Bucks Row, coming down from there all the way down. We don't expect it to stay the same, do we? Let's just assume that that is, I think I can overlay one picture here from this angle. Do you think that's it? This is Hanbury Street, and you can look up at these buildings. They really are Victorian. Well, that one isn't there, but these ones on the right are. And it goes all the way along here across the road. Can you imagine this? You know, in the darkest of nights, September, it's going to be bitter and cold. I mean, look at it now, teeming with people. That's Brick Lane. The brewery. Anyway, 29 Hanbury Street was where Annie Chapman was found. She became the second canonical victim of Jack the Ripper. And shortly before 5 a.m. on the 8th of September, the son of a resident of 29 Hanbury Street, John Richardson, entered the backyard of the property to check out the padlocked cellar in the yard to see that it was still intact. I'm looking for 29, it's along here somewhere. He then sat at the rear. Used to be 29 was on that side of the street. This side of the street has remained. Let's cross over and just have a look. This side of the street has remained intact and void of demolition. And I don't know if actually, you know, because of the war and the bombing and the Blitz. There's 26 Hanbury Street. Used to be that there's probably Ace and Tate is number 29 now. You photobomb me. Now I've lost all my train of thought. Two lovely girls smiling at me. So yeah, that side of the street, and I think I can overlay some old images. That's the only way to do it, to get the perspective. So the front door of 29 was always unlocked, and so people would come and go. And Annie Nichols, Annie Chapman's body was found in the backyard. Hanbury Street. This is the only street in all of the streets and places for the victims that still has the same name. Astonishing. This is Commercial Street. Now I've just come up from Brick Lane and Hanbury Street, you know, where Annie Chapman was discovered. And just opposite on Commercial Street is the police station. Now, in terms of the close proximity to all of the victims and the incidents, when we read about a policeman was summoned and they raced to the scene, it literally is just down there on the corner. So this was the Metropolitan Police Station. It still sits there. I guess it's just private flats now. You can imagine that in 1888 with, would it have been Aberline? Would he have been based there? Gosh, kind of brings it a bit closer to home, doesn't it? When you can actually see where they were located. We see so many, you know, the Michael Caine version, the Johnny Depp version. It's very hard to visualize what it looked like then and now because it's all cinematography. But if they had have set it up like that, because I don't think that's changed since the 1880s, 1890s. I'm now walking down Henrique Street, which was, in its day, Burner Street, and it really has changed. 1903 says the Cookery Laundry. But it was here that victim number 3, Elizabeth Stride, died. I'll give you, where I can, what 3 words locations. But the entrance was around about here, and at approximately 1 a.m, Sunday the 30th, in Dutfield's yard, Louis Deemschutz was bringing his horse down Berners Street and making his way into the alleyway, and his horse was startled. He tried to prod the bundle with his horsewhip but couldn't reach it, because that way I can overlay some old footage or an old picture, especially with the corner. It's now a school. But it's reported that many people consider Elizabeth Stride perhaps not to be a victim. This was the first of the two murders, which was known as the double murder, the double event. And so with Louis Diemschutz coming into the alleyway there, somewhere around here, he possibly disturbed the Ripper in the middle of what he was doing, or at least the perpetrator. It is suggested, I think Let Me Know has got a really good video, I'll put a link up here, that the perpetrator, Ripper, what you would like to call it, was actually in the midst of doing the deed. And as Louis Diemschutz brought the car into the alleyway there, clear off, I'm talking to camera. It's thought that the perpetrator ran up into the cul-de-sac of the alleyway and actually hid, while Louis Diemschutz then ran downstairs into the club to see if his wife was okay. Now, if that were the case, it's said that Mitre Square, which is just over there somewhere, which I'm going to go to next, or probably, is only 8 or 10 minutes distance if you're walking. So if Jack had come out, been disturbed, Louis Diemschutz shot down into the cellar of the club to see if his wife was okay, the killer would then come out. He didn't have time to finish the job. Shot off towards Mitre Square. Why on earth did I think it would take 8 minutes? It's taken me 17 minutes to walk here. Okay, so we're still in the 30th of September, and it's the night of the double murder, or the double event. Catherine Eddowes was discovered here in Mitre Square. It looks nothing like it used to look. And there's a Ripper tour going on there by the looks of it. So at the far end, I think it's St James's Passage, where the killer potentially had gone through. Elizabeth Stride's murder was within the jurisdiction of the Metropolitan Police. However, this is the City of London Police, because we crossed the boundaries. But it was the event that was marked as the double event, which appeared on the Saucy Jack postcard. On the 27th of September, the Central News Agency received a letter dubbed the Dear Boss Letter, in which the writer, who signed himself Jack the Ripper, claimed to have committed the murders. That building there. On the 1st of October, a postcard dubbed the Saucy Jackie postcard, and also signed Jack the Ripper, was received by the agency, and it claimed responsibility for the most recent murders on the 30th of September and described the murders of the two women as the double event. Police officials later claimed to have identified the specific journalist as the author of the Dear Boss Letter. Jack the Ripper was adopted as the name to refer to the murderer, and the international media frenzy, partly fed by Central News Agency in that office, bestowed notoriety on the killer. I'm competing with the Jack the Ripper tours. Jack the Ripper. But Catherine Eddowes, look, in the early hours of September the 30th, body of Catherine Eddowes, victim of the notorious Whitechapel murders. Following Catherine Eddowes' murder here in Mitre Square, the killer made his way. Now, it was something like a police constable who'd come walking through here at 1 a.m, saw nothing, and it took him 15 minutes to do his circuit, and by the time he came back to do the second part of his circuit, he found the body. So within 15 minutes the crime had been committed, and he had obviously murdered her left to right. That's all. That was the MO. It was the throat being cut, which immediately, you know, killed the victims. He could then get to task of disemboweling them. But what he did with Catherine Eddowes, he etched marks on her cheek. Dare I put pictures here? And did he cut her nose? But they considered it to be perhaps Masonic, you know, and that's where the From Hell story comes in, that, you know, the Freemasons and Prince Albert. So he was a suspect, but he was actually out of the country during one or more of the murders. Why did I get onto that subject? The Freemasons. So with the second murder, and the coins and the rings being taken, and then with Catherine Eddowes with the marks on her cheeks and everything, it kind of brought the Freemasons into the picture, i.e. From Hell and that storyline. The prostitute who was made pregnant by Prince Albert and potentially blackmailed by the other 4 prostitutes, so, or was it 5? And so they all had to be eliminated. I personally think that's a bit far-fetched, to be quite honest, but you know, people have been clasping at straws forever and ever, so right, because of that, the Ripper made his escape, came through St James Passage and headed up Goulston Street. Let me show you why. Right, I'm now in Goulston Street, and if you actually look up, despite the fact that there's so much modernisation going on, especially over there, if you actually look up, you get remnants of old Victorian. Now this is where we talk about the chalk inscription and a piece of apron that was left on the 30th of September. It's supposedly the Happy Chip Shop stands somewhere along here in Goulston Street. I don't know if I'll find it or not. 2:55 a.m. on the 30th, the blood-stained fragment of Catherine Eddowes' apron was discovered at the bottom of a common stairway tenement in Goulston Street. PC Alfred Long said that the section was also contaminated with sections of fecal matter. Ugh. And Long was adamant that the garment had not lain in the doorway when he had previously passed through. Well, I can't see a Happy Chip Shop, can you? And it could be any of those. Look at the old archway there. You'd like to think that maybe there was an archway here on Goulston Street. Old Victorian. Actually, I think I've seen pictures, and I might be able to get away with superimposing something. I don't know if that's the actual alleyway, but I'm intrigued by the shape. But scrawled upon the wall above a section of apron that was lying on the pavement was a crude chalk graffiti, commonly held to have read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." I'd like to think it was an alleyway just along here. And this led the Chief Inspector to immediately have the graffiti scrubbed from the wall, and it's not known if perhaps the graffiti was written by the Ripper, or it's just one of those coincidences that it actually existed already. I'm losing my train of thought because I've been accosted by the Ripperologists again. Well, he's pointing in that general direction, so I'd like to think I was right. Let's head on to another location. So walking down here on Old Castle Street, totally different to how it would have looked. There's nothing Victorian here now, is there? Maybe that old building. We would have had Castle Alley. Now, bearing in mind that the Whitechapel murders spanned from I think it was February 1888 all the way through till July 1891. There was Alice McKenzie, was possibly a prostitute, and she was murdered at about 12:40 a.m. on Wednesday the 7th of July 1889 in Castle Alley, which I can't find anywhere. Like most of the previous murders, her left carotid artery was severed from left to right, and there were wounds in her abdomen, so it kind of really had all the makings of a Jack the Ripper murder. The Commissioner Monroe at the time and one of the pathologists examining the body believed this to be a Ripper murder, although there was another pathologist, Phillips I think his name was, and Robert Anderson disagreed, as did Inspector Aberline. Later writers were divided and either suggested that Mackenzie was a Ripper victim or that the unknown murderer tried to make it look like a Ripper killing to deflect suspicion from himself. So at the inquest, Coroner Baxter acknowledged both possibilities and concluded there is great similarity between this and the other class of cases, Oldcastle Street. And what he said was, had they not been the same perpetrator, then it was clearly a very good imitation of the other cases. Spitalfields Market, rebuilt by Robert Horner during the year of Queen Victoria's Jubilee. Opposite the entrance to Spitalfields Market is the 10 Bells pub, and this pub, I'm watching as I cross the road here, this pub was frequented by more than one, shall we say, of the victims. So Annie Chapman could have been in here, Mary Kelly, Annie Chapman, I'm trying reeling them off here, Ann Nichols and Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes. One or more of them would have been in the 10 Bells pub. And I would imagine, I have it in my head that Christchurch, Spitalfields, this church itself has an importance in the story of Jack the Ripper, unless it was only in the scenes for From Hell that it was used. But I'm on the hunt for, and I won't find it because it doesn't exist anymore, Miller's Court, where the final victim of Jack the Ripper fell to at his hands. But Mary Jane Kelly became the final victim of Jack the Ripper. Now, at the time of her death, she was approximately 25 years old and working as a prostitute and living in relative poverty. I really just can't get down there at all. And unlike any of the other 4 canonical Ripper victims, each of whom had been murdered outdoors and whose mutilations could have been committed within minutes, Kelly was murdered within the sparsely furnished single room that she rented at 13 Miller's Court. You just cannot conceive it. I suppose if I walk down here, we might get an idea. Now, it's speculated that the Ripper took approximately 2 hours to mutilate her body, and it was completely stripped, it was laid bare, it was ripped open. It wasn't a nice scene. I've kind of been thinking, should I display the images of the victims on the screen? But I'm kind of thinking, no, that's a bit gory. All I wanted to do was find the locations, wasn't it? So I'm going to go down here because this might give us an idea. That's right. So actually, walking down White's Row here could have been the back alley that goes into Miller's Court, which would have ducked in behind there. You can't find all the locations anymore, they don't exist. Even 29 Hanbury Street has been demolished and turned into a chic restaurants. I wonder how many people sitting in there are actually wondering, I wonder if this is where Annie Chapman was found. Elizabeth Stride, the kids are playing on the playground where she was murdered. So that's it. I've covered everything that I think I want to cover. As I say, I haven't discussed who the potential suspects are. And you know what it does? It leads me to think that maybe 2 were the victims. Maybe Annie Chapman, and possibly 3, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes. The first murder, Mary Ann Nichols, possibly not a Ripper victim. This is just me talking. And Mary Kelly, I believe it was her partner, you know, that she had broken up with recently, and because he didn't want to share her as a prostitute with anybody else, that he killed her and made it look as if it was a Ripper victim, because it's just too clinical. You know, when you think that Jack the Ripper was kind of restricted to just a few minutes to perform his task, kill the woman, gut her, maybe take her intestines out, that kind of thing, and then flee the scene. The fact that Mary Kelly had up to 2 hours of being ripped apart, I'm lost. So what are your thoughts? Who do you think did it? And do you think the Canonical 5 were all victims of Jack the Ripper? I hope you've enjoyed this. I've completely lost track of what I'm doing and my bearings. When you're walking around London and it's all these old buildings mixed in with new buildings, I can't even tell you where north and south is at the moment. I think Liverpool Street is that way, but Liverpool Street station might be that way. I think I'm going to walk through that alleyway. So yeah, I'll cobble it together. We'll see if I can make any sense of everything. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.